Spider's GreedFall isn't up there with the greats of modern fantasy RPGs, but it has managed to find a cult collective of fans over the years. A clear love letter to the BioWare formula, GreedFall was a charming little adventure set across a vast and rich original setting, if you didn't mind a bit of jank, that is. Fast forward several years, and GreedFall 2, now known as GreedFall: The Dying World, has been released in early access and seeks to change pretty much everything about the original. Suddenly, the serviceable ARPG combat had switched to real-time with pause, and players were furious. Developer Spiders made it clear that this won't be changing, but did promise improvements to come. Having played through several hours of the latest build of The Dying World, I come away from a game that has been improved, but unlikely in a way that will win over the naysayers. Put simply, this is a combat system for those of you who miss KOTR and Dragon Age Origins, not something more modern and user-friendly. Even then, The Dying World falls short of living up to its evident inspirations. And yet, I'm also eager to play more. The combat is slow, awkward, and there weren't more than a few issues in even the earliest parts of the campaign, but The Dying World confidently fills a niche I didn't even realize needed filling. More importantly, it delves back into the first game's world to tell a new story that so far is well worth enduring the teething problems for.
The natives of Teer Fradee take center stage.
GreedFall's setting is one where magic meets industry. Fantasy wonders aren't used to better humanity, but to serve the interests of the various factions, whether it's building up a religion or expanding an empire. It's often a complaint around other fantasy stories set upon a backdrop of the Industrial Revolution that they romanticize the time period they draw influence from. Often we see what colonialism reaped for the colonizers, while ignoring the colonized. GreedFall could never be accused of that. Playing as a representative of one of the colonizers, the main story involves learning about our people's complicity in the horrors being experienced by the natives of Teer Fradee. I don't believe it's a weakness of the original GreedFall to have us play as the character we did, but it did leave the natives feeling underdeveloped compared to almost every other faction. The Dying World rectifies this by shifting the perspectives entirely, and the results are immediate. As soon as we take control of Vriden Gerr, our customizable protagonist, we delve into native culture, which is presented as being far less homogeneous this time around. Like any other group in the setting, they are made up of factions within factions, ideological disagreements, and a culture of their own. We even get to hear much more of the fictional language, as natives who speak to one another speak in their own tongue. This change in perspective does not mean the Dying World shies away from exploring the evil of the colonial powers in favor of a generic freedom fighter arc. Whereas the racists you'd encounter in GreedFall would often speak in euphemisms, the Dying World shows the true extent of such brutality, with disease and environmental destruction used as part of a genocide against the natives. It's a politically charged narrative with evident real-world parallels, and potential even in its early form. Of course, there are myriad pitfalls this could fall into. For starters, most of your companions belong to the factions that are destroying your land and culture. Should the game bend over backwards to explain how each of them is one of the good ones, or be about their journey and discovering how natives are people too, that could get very exhausting very quickly. The first GreedFall skirted around this by having the other factions have plenty of their own internal struggles. There are many questlines that have nothing to do with the natives, such as the uprising of the Coin Guard, which reflects another ill of the higher classes. But as the Dying World has us play as a native, that will always be at the forefront. At the very least, I only had one instance of a companion apologizing for his complicity, and I had the option to not forgive him, but Spiders has certainly given itself a difficult task here.
We have the BioWare structure, but not the BioWare quality.
Much like the first game, The Dying World gives us a rich world to explore, one that is wonderfully crafted and thoughtfully assembled. But once again, the dialogue leaves much to be desired. Characters have a habit of saying exactly how they feel about everything, and it often comes across as stilted and unnatural. It makes me feel disappointed. Even if the stories they find themselves in are well spun, and in what I saw they are, it's undercut by streams of emotionless conversation and a dialogue system as basic as what came before. Having gone back to the first game after this preview, the original arguably had stronger and more natural dialogue. Sure, the player characters' lines were never great, but the writing of characters Constantine and Siora was distinct and vivid, injecting personality and life into a story that could otherwise be found lacking. This was fewer and further between in my time with the Dying World. The best dialogue is reserved for the native characters, which is at least where I'd hope the best stuff would reside. But that made it harder to connect with my companions, a shame since, on paper, they are all ripe with potential.
I am slowly being won over on the combat changes.
The Dying World doesn't just stack cards against itself with the main narrative. After finding success as an ARPG, the sequel suddenly scraps GreedFall's combat mechanics in favor of real-time with pause. That is an incredibly difficult system to get right, and right out of the gate, the Dying World did not. Even after all of the current updates, this is not the glossy, engaging take on RTwP that we have in something like Final Fantasy VII Remake, but something far slower, tamer, and pulled back. I can see the Dragon Age Origins comparisons, but even then, it doesn't hit that mark. The combat isn't without merit, and I can see what the devs are going for at least. GreedFall's more action-y combat was very limited, with few abilities, and the ones that were available had to be accessed through a tactical pause menu anyway. So if this is what Spiders wanted to expand upon, then it makes sense to just go all in on RTwP. Another winner here is that we can finally control our companions in combat, directing them and using their abilities. Combine that with the improved variety of abilities, and getting into a fight is a lot more strategic this time around, as opposed to dodging and slashing in the first game. But at least that system was faster, and worked particularly well for boss battles. Here, combat involves sitting back and keeping an eye on your party's health bars, positioning, and ability cooldowns. Perhaps I need more time with it, but I never found anything in the Dying World that justified this Dragon Age Origins approach. If anything, I'd like to see something that's more in line with Dragon Age 2, where everything is sped up.
Even with all these doubts, it's still a solid RPG.
GreedFall: The Dying World is not the follow-up we expected, but it is still, at its core, a GreedFall game. Depending on how you felt about the first game, that might be an instant deal-breaker. But if it isn't, The Dying World is well worth learning a new combat system to see where this beautiful world and its compelling characters might take you. The Dying World is still in early access, but if you are waiting for a good starting point, I can heartily recommend picking it up now. There's a lot to sink your teeth into, and with any luck, it's only going to get better from here.